morning to the members and staff. Thank you all for being here today. I promise not to comment on the New York City weather, although last night it was, if anybody was out there last night, you got wet. We have what appears to be a brief agenda. It probably won't be, but we'll see what happens. And the first order of business, of course, is the approval of the October 11 meeting. Those minutes were mailed to you on the 2nd of November. You've had a chance to review them. You also have in front of you, I think, yes, some corrections that were made to the minutes. They're minor. Your copies are black line. If you choose to go through and see what they are, take a second to do that. The black lines are at the left end of the paragraph. I knew somebody was going to have to do that.
John, it's a separate sheet. Should be the 10.
17. Page 7?
No, it's the second page of the handout.
The handout? Oh, this.
Right.
Yep.
The handout. Got it.
On page 3, there was a correction of the word "he" to "my name."
Oh,
to be more specific. On page 6, in the first full paragraph under Bronx Lebanon Hospital, the word "the" is deleted before economically disadvantaged. And on page 13, a paragraph dealing with the update on the reserve funds, a phrase was added to indicate Kim Nadow's agreement that she would update the board on these reserve funds at today's meeting.
all minor changes. Have you got a chance to take a look, satisfy your curiosity? Okay. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes as revised? Sandra, thank you. Is there a second? Gerard, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Second order of business is the report of the Finance Committee. Chairman Romsky.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee met yesterday afternoon in New York City and also by video up in Albany. We addressed 3 offerings. One was the cerebral palsy offering. We recommend that be approved. Then we advanced to the Touro College Obligated Group. After some extensive discussion and back and forth, we also recommend that that be advanced today. And then we finally ended with the TELP financing for Montefiore, and we again recommend that be approved. That concludes the report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for Jerry? Hearing none, we will move to the to item 3 on the agenda, which is the material behind.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Of course.
Jerry, are we funding a religious subset of the Touro colleges? Is that an issue?
It didn't appear to be the case.
Okay.
No,
By no means.
All right, I see the yeshiva listed.
It's part of Touro.
Part of Touro.
That's all. It's a recently acquired entity within Touro. But it's not part of this financing.
That's the on the sheet. That's the purple one. That sort of was outside on the edge there. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Sure. And we'll go to tab number 3. It's the cerebral palsy affiliates, Joanio Inc. Steve. Morning.
It's a long way away.
Under the Public Authorities Law, DASNY is authorized to issue bonds on behalf of cerebral palsy associations of New York State and its 24 affiliates, which the staff report collectively refers to as UCP. The UCP statute also provides DASNY with the authority to intercept funds from any state or local agency or social service district. To date, DASNY has issued bonds for 12 UCP affiliates and 9 separate bond issues. The staff report before you presents one or more series of fixed and/or variable rate, tax-exempt and/or taxable bonds in an amount not to exceed $23 million for a term not to exceed 30 years on behalf of Joanio Inc., which will be the only UCP affiliate to participate in proposed financing. Joanio also participated in the 2002, 2005, and 2014 DASNY bond issues for UCP and currently has approximately $1.5 million of Series 2014 bonds outstanding. Joanio provides services to over 10,000 people each year in Rockland, Westchester, and Orange counties. Approximately $17.3 million of bond proceeds will be used to construct an approximate 69,000 square foot building at 260 North Little Ford Road in the New City. The building will serve as the borrower's headquarters and health center to be used for health services, day habilitation programs, and administrative offices. The facility is being built adjacent to its current headquarters, which will ultimately be torn down and converted into parking for the new facility. Joanio will also be utilizing approximately $650,000 of bond proceeds to refinance a TD bank loan. The project is not supported by a prior property approval from the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. Rather, the borrower receives additional funds from OPWDD to pay for administrative and replacement reserve costs, as well as fees for services from the Department of Health, State Education Department, and other payers, all of which are available to pay debt service. Under the UCP statute, non-PPA revenues are also subject to intercept and are included in the pledged revenues. The proposed bond issue is similar to 2 DASNY financings earlier this year for Cerebral Palsy Associations of New York State and Hudson Valley Cerebral Palsy Associations, and that is expected to be a fixed rate private placement with one or more Oppenheimer funds, a qualified institutional buyer. Security as required by Oppenheimer is expected to include a revenue pledge, the intercept of funds payable to the borrower by state and local entities, a mortgage on certain properties, a debt service reserve fund, and financial covenant. Certain collateral, including the mortgage property, is expected to be shared with taxable bonds that Joanio is issuing on its own, private placement, also with Oppenheimer funds. This non-DASNY taxable deal is expected to occur at the same time as the DASNY tax-exempt issuance and is being used to terminate the borrower's defined benefit plan. Mr. Chairman.
Steve, thank you. Steve pointed out in yesterday's meeting that there is, as he just did, there is no prior property in this transaction. I understand that to mean that OPWDD, while it will give funds to the agency as those funds are needed, has not actually said in a PPA that it is obligated to do so. The expectation is that that OPWDD will advance funds to Joanio, and if I got that wrong, Steve, correct me.
No, that's right. There's no PPA, like you said, associated with the financing. They do expect that there will be OPWDD programs within that building, and I believe it's roughly 20-25% of the space is expected to be used for OPWDD programs. Other parts of the building are expected to be used for DOH programs, SED programs, and administrative space.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Paul.
So I guess I was unclear. Is the reason there is no PPA because there are relatively few programs within the facility that are under OPWDD, or is there because they don't like the deal?
That's right. I mean, I think a lot of times with the PPAs, they'll be for residential facilities where the entire project is OPWDD related. This project, it's much bigger, involves SED, DOH, administrative space. So I think when there is a program within that facility, ultimately it probably will have a PPA, but it's not directly tied to the financing, it's tied to the program that's run within the building.
Got it. Got it.
So those talks have begun with OPWDD they're working out space. And it'll probably be existing programs that are transferred from the old facility into the new facility.
So there would presumably be OPWBD financing, but at this point, we don't know the extent because there's no PPA.
That's right. I mean, basically, it's just like the funds that they receive from the other payers. They run programs, administrative, or there's a fee for those services. Those get put into the general revenues of the institution, which can be used to pay debt service along with funds from DOH, SED, other payers.
Are there other questions? Yes, Sandra.
Steve, I realize this is a small part of the deal, but would you just tell me a little bit more about the refinancing, why it's being done?
Yes, there's a TD bank loan which was utilized, I believe, for the Early Childhood Education Center, which is adjacent to the headquarters building. So they're just, it's providing long-term capital financing on a tax-exempt basis to take out that taxable TD bank loan that was used for capital projects at the Early Childhood Education Center. Various renovations.
And the reason for refinancing it now is?
Better interest rate. Yeah, there's no extension of debt. It's just better interest saving.
Other questions?
I also explained the name at the finance committee. That was very interesting. I'll ask that question.
Yes, Joanio is a Native American word for independence, and I believe it was in 1949, the first summer camp for children with disabilities was opened in Rockland County, and that was called Camp Joanio. And when cerebral palsy of Rockland County outgrew the Rockland County borders, they changed their name to Joanio to reflect that.
And I worked there when I was a teenager.
This is turning into a great story. Thank you very much.
I did not know that, but yes.
Other questions or comments for Steve? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Gerard, thank you very much. Darrell, thank you for the second. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. The motion carries unanimously. I didn't intend to usurp the president's introduction of the cerebral palsy matter, and I do apologize. Please pick up the ball now and run with it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. It is a great day to be here, particularly after driving down on 87 in the rain. The sleep was horrible.
It was sleep.
Yeah, it was sleep. Oh, it was sleep. So it was quite an experience. You know what we call it, cold knuckle. All right. So pardon me if I appear a little nervous. It was rough last night. It really was. Behind tab 4 is the Toro College obligated group transaction. Matt Burden will present the credit summary and staff report. Credit summary and staff report with additional materials were mailed November 2nd, 2017. Matt?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just want to make sure everyone has the color organizational chart. Hopefully everybody has that in front of them. We're going to use that in the presentation. But just to begin with, the staff report provided to the members presents a 30-year term in an amount not to exceed $75 million on behalf of Truro College Obligated Group. I wanted to take a moment right now to go over Appendix 1, which is, again, the colored chart, which has the heading Truro College and Related Entities. So the financing that we're doing today is for the Truro College Obligated Group. And the obligated group includes Truro College, Truro University, Nevada, and New York Medical College. The obligated group was created in 2014, and we issued $94.3 million in June of 2014. The bonds were rated BBB- from Fitch, and that is the expected rating for this bond issue. Historically, only certain divisions of Truro College have had their revenues and certain mortgages pledged, and those are on the far left in the green boxes, starting with the Truro College of Osteopathic Medicine. And I wanted to make the point, we deem these the designated enterprises of Truro College. And again, these entities have had their revenues and mortgages pledged under the MTI. When looking at the designated enterprises and then Truro University, Nevada, and New York Medical College, these make up approximately 73% of the total assets and total revenues of the entire Truro enterprise. As this is an obligated group structure, obligations issued under the master trust indenture will be joint and several obligations of each member of the obligated group and will be further secured by a lien on certain gross receipts and mortgages on real property. In addition, there'll be a 1-year debt service reserve fund as security. This financing is a little different in that the mortgage on the property that we're going to finance, which is the project, the student resident for the Lander College for Women, this mortgage will be pledged under the MTI. And so when we look at the project, what we're going to finance, it's going to be the purchase and renovation of 4 stories of a building in Manhattan to be used for student housing for the Lander College for Women. There's also a smaller subset of the project, which is renovation and equipment purchases at the New York Medical College campus. I'm getting some late information that this may delay the financing with the reviews involved. So that may come out of the financing. We'll know more as time progresses. But again, the main part of what we're financing is the purchase and renovation of 4 stories of a building to be used for the student housing for the Lander College for Women. Looking at the entire Truro enterprise, it's important to note that there's financial assistance that's given to both the Lander colleges and the yeshivas. So in the staff report, we look at Truro in its entirety, as does the rating agency, again, because of the financial assistance to what we're deeming non-designated enterprise, specifically the yeshivas and the Lander colleges. However, these 2 enterprises do provide financial assistance in terms of both fundraising, and they're also looked at feeder schools as they provide students that enter other areas of Truro. Just going through the staff report, I wanted to make note, when we discuss enrollment, there was some fluctuations in the undergraduate and graduate reporting, and in speaking with the institution, a lot of that is from the fact that they have a new enrollment software, and students that were previously regarded as undergraduate students, specifically in the physical therapy and pharmacy programs, were reclassified as graduate students, and that's the reason for that fluctuation. And just some background on that. The pharmacy program is a 4-year program, but it's a PharmD program where students receive a doctor of pharmacy. The physical therapy program leads to both a combined Bachelor of Science in Health Sciences and a clinical doctorate in physical therapy. So the fluctuations are really more of a classification issue, but I think it's important to note that both total enrollment and total FTEs are at the highest levels reported, again, and that was in fall of 2017, the most recent semester for the information. Looking at the operational analysis, the school reported, or Truro in its entirety reported a 0.7% net operating margin and a net income ratio of 1.2%. Historically, the financials have shown losses from operations, but as their newer programs have developed and expanded, and in addition, there's been tuition increases, a temporary hiring freeze, careful cost controls, and positive investment results, that has led to the turnaround, if you will, and the positive margins produced. Specifically, there's been growth in the Truro College of Osteopathic Medicine, and they've also opened up their new dental school. So you see the turnaround as the investment in these programs has come to fruition. The total operating revenue increased by $22 million from 16 to 17, and the total operating expense only went up by $500,000. The numbers portray the draft audit. We have just received the final audit. Many of the numbers do not change. For instance, as I mentioned, the net operating margin and the net income margin did not change. Also, the primary reserve ratio, viability ratio, leverage ratio, and available assets ratio all did not change. There was a slight change in the debt service coverage ratio, which went from 2.0 to 1.9, and we'll be providing an update at the adoption of documents. I also just wanted to make note on the revenue composition. The revenue composition takes a snapshot of the unrestricted operating revenue. And when we see investment returns of 1.1%, I just wanted to make note that that is the investment returns that are appropriated for operations in the unrestricted operating revenue column. That is not their investment return in terms of percentage. The total investment return was $9.9 million, leading to a 9.3% investment return. So perhaps in the future we could just label that investment revenue, and I think that would be more clear to the readers. Just in closing, Truro College is going to consolidate its student housing for the Lander College for Women. It will get out of an existing lease, and it's going to sell a current student residence. The new mortgage will be included as part of the security in the MTI, and we put this obligated group together a few years ago, but since then I just think it's important to note that Truro has met all of its required financial ratios and has made all of its obligations in terms of its debt service payments in a timely manner. Mr. Chairman.
Matt, thank you very much. Are there questions for Matt? Yes, John. Sorry, John.
I was uncomfortable when we did this the last time, and I'm getting more uncomfortable this time. And this looks to me like what I likened to earlier today to the old Ling Temco vault, which indicates my age. One of the first conglomerates ever, and if you look around today, you never heard of Ling Temco vault. It's gone. And, there's all these moving the funds from this entity to that entity, and the profits and that are supporting something here in New York, and it just isn't clear to me what they're doing.
Well, they're moving.
They're moving funds, and so
they're putting funds. They're employing funds where it appears to me that they're employing funds where they need those funds.
It appears to me they're accounting for funds where they need to account for funds to make a case to borrow some more money. That's my concern. This is an accounting effort here to prove that they're capable of taking care of more debt. I'm very uncomfortable with it.
I think one of the things to take into consideration, John, is that when you look at this chart, and as Matt has explained, there's the entire Truro enterprise. In the report, the way that the numbers have been outlined, the numbers are for the entire Truro enterprise. So it is the most conservative way in which to present the numbers, to your point about sort of the moving pieces. It's the way we've analyzed it. It's the way the rating agencies analyze it. I think, in response to the concern that you're raising, that there are, there's the obligated group, there's certain non-designated entities within the obligated group that are in blue. The Truro enterprise is larger than the obligated group. So I think showing the numbers in that way gives you the most conservative view of the institution. The other thing that I would note is that, as Matt had described, the institutions in blue, those non-designated enterprises that are part of Truro College, and yet do not have their revenues and mortgages pledged. In this instance, to the extent that the Lander colleges are being considered for the financing, notwithstanding the fact that previously there were no revenues or mortgages pledged, in this instance, as a credit strength, the mortgage will be pledged to the MTI.
For the condo units, for the four floors, the condos, whatever that value of that is.
So the Lander College is pledged, or it's not?
So,
I was just going to say that the project that we're considering this morning, which is the purchase of 4 floors of a building to be used for student residence, that mortgage will be put into the MTI. That will go up on top, as we say, into the security of the master trust
And
indenture.
it's the first mortgage, right, Matt?
Yes.
And something was reclassified, like the graduate students at the College of Pharmacy were reclassified to not be part of
They were just reclassified from undergraduate to graduate.
and are there the proceeds from their tuition and profit, is that an element of what's pledged or not?
The students,
The graduate students.
yes, in the College of Pharmacy, and the School of Health Sciences.
That's all being
Right,
pledged.
right. That's just a classification issue. They're getting, what they say, a doctor of pharmacy.
Right.
So, it was just how their enrollment software classified the
But
students.
for the purposes, it's just the enrollment aspect of it.
Right,
not
it doesn't affect
purposes of the
tuition, it
finance.
doesn't affect how much they're charged, anything like that.
Okay.
When you mentioned this morning, which I didn't know about yesterday, with the New York Medical College piece might sort of go away, they will still, though, be part of the obligated group, right?
Oh, yeah,
They don't, like,
yeah.
fall out of the
It's
whole
really the
security piece?
seeker and the tax work. We're in kind of an expedited schedule now, so they don't want to get hung up going through the due diligence on $10 million of a borrowing for New York Medical College. They don't want the tail wagging the
But
dog.
they stay in, the green stays on the.
Yeah, it's just
No matter what.
the dollars borrowed for New York Medical College.
So, Lander College is included.
Just the mortgage on the property for the Lander College for
We're
which.
supporting Lander College through this bond issue, which according to this record here, teaches men and women separately, and it doesn't seem to meet with the general policies of the society that we support here in New York. This seems to be a institution which has a perfect right to do what they're doing, but I'm not sure that it deems public support. And we are public support by reducing their costs.
I would
I
amplify that.
understand your perspective. I really do. It's a philosophical question.
Well, some people are more equal than others, and that's not right.
I think the other thing that strikes me about this is that this is more than a quarter a religious organization, and we're taking the position that we can do this because we've hived off the religious pieces. Only the secular aspects of the organization are being pledged. That's a distinction that I think an observer of this transaction would not necessarily appreciate or even agree with. It's a legalistic to say that we're not funding a religious organization because those assets aren't pledged it strikes me as a legalistic way of going at this.
Well, clearly, staff council and bond council have looked at that question. You're right. I mean, the notion that you can excise a portion of what would normally be a part of the obligated group, the notion that you can do that does actually raise philosophical issues. But I don't think you're suggesting that there are legal issues.
Well, I'm actually not inclined to vote for this one. And I would actually, for the record, note that the two people who raised this issue are named Johnson and Gardner, but the Gardner one is Jewish. Notwithstanding that. So, Mike wants to say something.
So, to try to address the concern and recognizing that we're at the resolution to proceed stage, our tax and bond council will be reviewing all aspects of this transaction. We're just starting now. We'll be reviewing
Who was
all.
that, Mike?
Our tax and bond counsel on this is going to be. I think I have it here.
Okay, whatever, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll pull it up in a second. But we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of the religious use issues to make sure that there aren't any church and state issues that need to be evaluated more carefully. And to the extent those issues are encountered, they're largely tax issues that there are tools available and recognized in the law for addressing that, including allocation of equity, of which Matt has reported on some of the equity aspects in his report. So I would think that it's on our radar. We're going to look at it very, very closely, and it's something that we would report back
Is there precedent for making this distinction, this sort of?
We did issue bonds in 2014
Yeah, but to this organization.
to the Churro College Obligated Group, and we've also done 2 private placements.
And forgive me, John, I misspoke. I thought that analysis had already either started or been completed. Clearly it hasn't.
And how is it, I mean, this is not the only entity that has both a religious component and a secular component. I mean, I'm going to say St. John's, but that may not be an example, but there are many. I mean, this is not a case of first instance
We had a
review.
private placement. It closed in June, and that was certainly an entity that got reviewed as far as the secular nature, but that passed the muster. We issued tax-exempt bonds. That was a private placement that closed in June.
To answer Member Ronski's question, we have a number of transactions going now because of the deadline, but Toro Obligated Group, the bond counsel will be Hawkins with Golden Holly James as MWB.
Okay.
I just wanted to check, shoot from the hip.
I think it's appropriate that you register your concerns about
I
this.
have another concern besides.
Well, let me finish. I had some of those concerns initially, but I've gotten comfortable, John, with the staff's review of this and with the questions I've asked and have had answered by staff, that A, we're at the first stage, not the second stage, of the review process. And B, when we meet again, if this passes muster today, we can ask as many questions as we choose to ask about the religious and secular split here, and how the tax treatment will address that if there is a need to treat it that way. So I've gotten comfortable enough with it to be willing to go that way today. But I will say to you that I had 25 questions that Matt and Portia were kind enough to answer for me before this meeting. It got me to a comfort level. You had another concern?
I'm not concerned. I'm just curious about the fact that this is going to be a plan is for a simultaneous bond issue with the state of Nevada.
Yep.
And I didn't see, maybe I missed it, no further discussion of it in that sentence.
Pointed out at the very top,
At the very beginning, it's pointed out.
page 2.
But I'm not familiar with with how these things work in Nevada. It's a different state than New York, I think. They have different rules.
Well, Matt, why don't you address that? The notion that they're going to go out and incur additional debt away from that in Nevada.
Right. So, with an obligated group that has members in various states, we talk about how these obligations are joint and several obligations of these members. There are capital needs in the Turo University of Nevada School, and again, I believe that's on page 2. It's the top right paragraph. Turo University of Nevada also plans to borrow money under the obligated group structure through the City of Henderson, Nevada Public Improvement Trusts. They're estimating about an $11 million for renovations to its campuses. And Turo University of Nevada is one of the stronger entities in the obligated group in terms of its profit margin. They have a strong demand for their student population, and they will be borrowing money, again, under the obligated group structure. There'll be a preliminary official statement. It'll be the same pricing wire in terms of the rating, the bond issue. It'll go out on Bloomberg, and the investors will assess it much the same way they would assess the DASNY bond issue. But just to give you some background on Truro University, Nevada, for the most recent year ending June 30th, 2017, they made approximately $3.8 million on $52.2 million of operating revenue. So, you know, it's probably about a 7.5% operating margin, but they have a high demand for their students in Nevada, and they're looking to do $11 million in improvements. And again, that will be a borrowing under the obligated group where everyone is liable for that borrowing.
One of the things we looked at yesterday was the value of the security. I know there's the debate when you hear from Moody's about it doesn't really matter, blah, 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 but yet we did try to take a look at what that value of the security was in theory worth, although there was no appraisal apparently being done, although Matt said he'll get us some additional information on it. The apartment building, though, it's a brand new building on the west side of Manhattan.
Right.
I don't know what units they're buying, but they clearly have some value. You would think that the security, again, based that it's a first mortgage and that there's no tricks sort of hidden somewhere in the documents, which is a possibility, but that there's enough security there at least to sort of secure that particular debt. I looked at it just from that perspective, because every other concerns are more than valid.
Well, and you raised that question.
Pointed that out
in several different ways at the Finance Committee meeting yesterday. It seems to be our policy not to get appraisals where on property that's being mortgaged, where the security is deemed investment grade by the rating.
Yes.
So I mean that's what I heard Matt say yesterday. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So
and we respectfully understood that, but we still were inquiring a little further about the value of the.
Well, it raises for me the question whether or not there are instances where, when we're dealing with an institution as highly leveraged as this one is, whether there might be exceptions to a rule where we want to go out and get an appraisal. I gather the answer to that is no.
I think it comes down to basically the rating methodology which is employed. And for institutions, higher ed and healthcare institutions, it's a fundamental analysis of the institution itself and its ability and the ability of the institution to carry the debt. It's not a real estate analysis. Right. You know, there are, so that's, you know, so one bucket is a fundamental analysis of the institution, which is really what happens in the sector. Another is just to have a straight up real estate analysis where, you know, you're looking at a standalone individual property. You're looking at the revenues and the expenses, net operating income, debt service coverage, you know, the value of the mortgage.
Right, but it is the backstop, though. The mortgage, at the end of the day, is the backstop if this thing, and there are concerns about the viability of the debt. I actually, at the end of the day, I believe that the security is probably more than sufficient. Sure. Based upon, but again, not I haven't done an appraisal, just based upon what you have in the report and what I know about that building, blah, 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 blah. You know, there's clearly value there.
Sure. It's
condos,
certainly an important element of the security.
But I still look at it that way. I don't count the fact that it's a triple B negative. Okay, Moody's can have that view, but I'm entitled to my own view of what the security
And they do look
is.
at the demand.
And then I'm okay with it, but I just look at it a little deeper than.
And when you add, there are facts on page 2 that I raised questions about, and I'm satisfied with staff's explanation, but the first paragraph under the table on page 2 makes the point that the obligated group has bonds outstanding in California and Nevada totaling about $50 million. So Nevada's adding $11 million to the 50 already outstanding. Do I have that right, Matt?
Yes, I'm just looking at the Nevada, 33.8 million, right, so another 44.8.
I'm talking about the combined.
Right.
63
60,
plus.
right, 60 million between California and Nevada.
That's right. And I was satisfied with Matt's explanation that they've done the analysis, that the Henderson, Nevada operation apparently is doing well. It's certainly able to carry its debt load. And I assume the same thing is true in California. So I'm comfortable with the explanation. It's just that the leverage is high from my vantage point. Let me ask a question, Matt, that I didn't think of yesterday. They've advised us of their intent in Nevada to borrow $11 million to issue bonds. Does the MTI require that they give us notice, that members of the obligate group give us notice if there are additional bonds to be issued? If California and Nevada were to go after more debt, do we have the right to know that? I know we don't approve it, but do we have the right to know that?
I think that would be, it would be publicly disclosed on Emma, but I think in just talking with the CFO, as he's one of our clients, we would know that. We would know that. We get their financials, we get their interim financials, we speak with the institution.
Okay.
We would know that.
I'm satisfied with that.
They're also putting in, going back to the real estate, they are putting another $23.5 million in equity into the buy, right, from the sale of the other building.
The equity contribution,
like a real estate
it may change slightly if they don't borrow from New York Medical College. There will be an equity component, but if they pull back on New York Medical College, they would probably borrow a little bit more for the Lander College for Women, but ultimately more money would go to their would go to their cash and investments if they put less equity in. So instead of, they had talked about $23 million in equity, $23 million to pay off the loan, and $33 million for their cash and investments. If they only put $18 million in his equity, they would still have to pay off the loan for $33 million, and then the remaining dollars to the cash and investments would be $38 million. If they put in less equity and borrowed more, they would end up with more money in their cash and investments.
Sandra?
Matt, would you remind me or tell me who is under the MTI? Which divisions are?
Truro College in its entirety is in the MTI, along with Truro University, which is in California, Truro University, Nevada, and New York Medical College. Of Truro College, only certain designated enterprises have their revenues and mortgages pledged.
And what's the rationale?
And those are?
The ones in green.
The four in the green.
What we're saying
The
is,
ones to the far left, Truro College of Osteopathic Medicine, Truro College of Pharmacy, the School of Health Sciences, and the newly created the Truro College of Dental Medicine, which is at New York Medical College.
And Truro University in California, but, never mind, Truro College, but not the entities in blue.
Right.
Are
The
not.
entities in blue do not have their revenues or mortgages pledged. This financing will be the exception with the mortgage on the 4 floors of the student residence for the Lander College for Women.
But the MTI permits the issuance of debt for entities that are not under the MTI.
It's
In
a
this case,
technical
Landers
thing,
College.
but Truro College is in the MTI. They segregate their divisions as to assets and revenues that are pledged. But the Lander College for Women and the Lander College for Men are part of Truro College.
The portions identified in blue are not separate legal entities. They are simply divisions within Truro College. So Truro College is fully obligated on all of the debt, as are the other 3 members of the obligated group. However, only certain mortgages have been pledged, and those are identified as being related to, with the exception of this mortgage, the 4 entities whose revenues are also pledged. The items in blue, while on an enterprise basis, all of the revenues of everything is available to pay debt service. Their revenues are not specifically pledged to pay debt service.
And their reason for that structure?
Some of the entities in blue had prior banking relationships where mortgages were pledged to the bank, so they couldn't pledge their mortgages. And the way they originally set it up was that the entities in green to the far left had higher margins, just were better in terms of profitability. And that's why they set it up like that.
But isn't also the reason that we're at least for purposes of this financing, carving out the yeshiva so that we're not directly financing a yeshiva? I mean, my issue with this is that to the entire world, the yeshiva and the Hebrew Theological College are part of Torah. So what we've done is create a legal fiction that we're not financing those operations because we put in some legal documents, some language about them not being pledged and the revenues are being pledged. But you know, we're talking out of both sides of our mouth when we say that the Toro has pledged its resources. And Toro, everything that is Toro College is obligated on these bonds. And then we say out of the other side that we've hived off assets and revenues purely to the risk of being impolitic, dance around the separation of government and religion.
Well, the other point, though, is that there are not capital dollars being borrowed and issued for the yeshivas or the Hebrew Theological College. So, when I see the legal analysis, a lot of it is the line in the sand as to where the actual projects are being financed and what that use will be.
But Turo College can still provide financial support to all of the blue, the
That's
yeshivas.
correct. That's correct.
So in a sense, going to John's point, we're borrowing out of this pocket, but this pocket can still provide financial support to the yeshivas. Which is sort of is both an issue of the religious issue, but also is that the yeshivas, their assets are not pledged, but financial support can go in the other direction, subject to certain financial covenants?
That's correct. Financial support can go from Turo College.
From the obligated entities
Right.
to those which are not obligated. And our comfort comes from the fact that there are financial covenants that limit the amount of that
There are
support.
liquidity tests, debt service coverage ratio tests. There's a number of tests that will keep the obligated group at a threshold that the investors are comfortable with.
But you could say that the financial viability of lenders has an impact on the other blues.
Money is fungible.
Right.
Money
It has an
is
impact on
structured.
Turo
On
College.
Turo College, right.
Which
Right.
means everything in.
Everything.
So the-
But that though is really relates to whether the bond is. So if we issue these bonds get issued as tax exempt bonds, based upon our council's opinion, and then somehow later on, whatever, it's determined no, that's their risk, right? It becomes a tax. What happens?
It's the same risk that is borne by any organization that finances through us that has a religious component. And hypothetically, if there was a change in law, you'd have to analyze that under a change in law, and come to your conclusion. And maybe you have to take out some bonds as a result of that change in law. But really, we're looking at things that aren't really in front of us right now. What's in front of us is the current standard for this type of review is fairly well defined. The framework exists. We have the experts, the bond counsel, who will help us through this, and they can give a presentation on it, assuming we get through the diligence process and answer the board's questions. And we'll make sure that we relay this discussion to them in detail. I was glancing at the minutes from May of 2014. A lot of the same points came up, including the MTI points that you raised. We'll have that review.
Who was the council back then?
It was Toto and Howard.
Hawkins.
Yes.
Yep.
Same council.
Well, Mike, you actually preempted what I was going to ask, whether we might have at some point, even before we get to the final the vote. Assuming we get through today, it would be great to sit down with council and have questions answered. I mean, these are all, I think, important questions. We answered them once before. There are people on the board now who were not on the board then and who don't have the benefit of having heard the explanations from council that we got then. So if it's possible to do something like that, it would be very helpful before we go to a final vote on the transaction itself, as opposed to approving a resolution to prepare documents now.
Yeah, no,
Could we
this
do
is
that?
resolution to proceed
Right.
only, and we'll engage council and we'll get started. And happy to arrange that if that helps.
Okay.
We'll have time. It looks like we're going to be doing things in the next month anyway.
Yeah, that's
Oh, that's what I'm
We're gonna be
thinking.
busy.
We have a couple of opportunities
Add
to
something to the agenda.
work
Yeah,
that in.
yeah,
Yes.
good. Other questions for Matt? Are we prepared to go to a vote on this? Recognizing that there may be some unreadiness, but are we prepared to vote on it?
I remain very uncomfortable with this. I'm not willing to say no to proceeding, but I think that given the nature of the questions that have been raised and the uncertainty about all of this, this should be a very diligent move forward. It should not be just let's fill up forms.
I think everybody at this table agrees. That's correct.
So the record should show that the vote to move forward does not mean that questions have been answered
Answer,
yet.
yes, I have questions that I still don't understand. There's no point pursuing it any longer. It's just a lot of numbers. It's hard to digest.
To the extent the council thinks it's important enough to do it, and I think it is, the minutes will reflect it.
Okay.
Are there other questions for Matt? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
I'll do.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Paul. All in favor, please indicate with aye. 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 Are there any opposed? Okay. John? Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Are any opposed? So the motion passes.
Behind tab 5 is the Montefiore Medical Center TELP transaction with Portia Lee presented.
Thank you very much. Behind tab 5 is the financing on behalf of Montefiore Medical Center, an amount not to exceed $10 million for health lease. As you know, it's the policy of Public Authorities Control Board that requires that financings which exceed $10 million in a 12-month period be brought before both PACB and the DASNY Board for approval. This is the second TELP authorization requested in calendar year 2017. If you turn to the attached equipment list, you'll see that Montefiore is looking to finance nursing, radiology, information technology, as well as other types of equipment, Mr. Chairman.
Questions about the proposed TELP financing? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve it? John, thank you. John Gardner, thank you. For a second. All in favor, please indicate with aye. 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 If none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Mr. President,
Thank you.
it's time for your report.
I would like to begin with the first DASNY Engineering News Record ENR Conference on Higher Education Construction in New York City. It was held on October 25th at the CUNY Graduate Center and was attended by a wide variety of dignitaries, including the 42nd District Assemblywoman Rodney's Bishop, as well as more than 200 representatives from construction, engineering, and architectural firms. I had the pleasure of delivering the keynote address explaining DASNY's role in expanding New York State's economy while delivering sustainable, inclusive communities. I also outlined our One DASNY initiative, the integration of our finance, design, and construction resources to maximize impact and get results. In support of our integration of public finance and construction, I also moderated a panel that provided our private clients, including New York University, Columbia University, and Vassar College, the opportunity to present their pipelines in the context of trends that are shaping the sector. It was a very dynamic panel, well received. We certainly want to replicate the raw materials that really went into that. That was, I would say, Mr. Chair, you were present, Mr. Romsky, you were present. I think that was really a foundational event for the day.
It was.
Really
Very
was
well
incredible.
received.
It was
Nicely
really,
done.
it was really incredible. So we're going to try to figure out how to capture that in other settings. But I think that panel in and of itself was just phenomenal.
Also, the people who are listed in your higher education construction paragraphs in the report to the board are people, for the most part, who we've seen perform publicly in the past, and they all do great jobs, everybody. I got to watch Wayne Benjamin at this conference. I did not know him, really. I met him a couple of times. But I thought he was superb in his presentation, where he handled it. He did a great job.
I'd second that.
You are preempting me.
Oh, am I?
Sorry, I thought we do.
I thought you were leaving that.
No, not at all. We have more on that topic because it was an incredible event.
It was.
But thank you for acknowledging that. I think it was a very broad, again, when we talk about how to put these things together, this is a very comprehensive effort on the part of all players. It really cuts across all of DASNY. And so we got a lot of support, certainly starting with our communications team, in terms of Freeman and the team members who really led this and worked with our construction division. I'd also highlight Steve Coro presented DASNY's construction pipeline, which largely reflected projects on CUNY, SUNY, and the mental hygiene campuses. We had a great panel moderated by Wayne Benjamin that highlighted the successful journeys of MWBE firms that have partnered with DASNY and DASNY's role in their achievements. Again, well attended, and it was an opportunity for people to see Wayne and him get some visibility.
Yeah,
really.
really.
And so he's a very sharp individual that we've got to figure out how to get a little more airtime. We obviously had Mike Stabulus, Wayne Benjamin, and Paul Krugman really talking about the complexities of doing business in the New York City metro area, the role of MWBEs in DASNY's New York City project labor agreement, and how to do business with DASNY. So I think net, an excellent event, well attended. We've got strong support from the team. You know, as we looked at this retrospectively, the one thing we would do differently is we would build in an opportunity for our public finance team. We shorten the program, but we build in an opportunity to bring our public finance team, or at least some segment of it, to talk to folks, the construction people, the general contractors, about the work that we're doing in that space, because what we recognized fairly immediately when we talked about the NYU transaction, that was really one of the big things that people connected to in terms of tax exempt and taxable debt, the financing that was attached to that project. Net, it was an incredible, I think, opportunity for us to work with our clients, and we're trying to figure out ways to do more of that. I would just highlight to you, I believe it was last year or early this summer, the years just combined, we did something similar to that, upstate New York, and that was well attended. That was very well attended. So we want to do more. We're finding ways to do more, and we'll come back to you. and thank you for your support and attendance. As it relates to budget review, our finance division is in the process of developing the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 operating budget. Information is currently being gathered from all DASNY departments and compiled by the budget department in anticipation of sending a draft budget package to the board on or by December 31st, 2017, as required under the Public Authorities Accountability Act. You will be asked to adopt the budget at the March 2018 meeting. Another thing that we're doing to support this initiative, as we highlighted to you, we have put in place years ago succession planning. And succession planning, recognizing that we have a sizable number of individuals who are at a point in their tenure where they are preparing or will leave the institution. That will be a significant impact in terms of our human capital. That's a successful initiative that has been working for now 2 years. On top of that, as you know, we are going through a very aggressive evaluation of our organization in terms of how we use technology and how we make sure that we are focused on our cost structure. And so one of the things that we are doing is we're putting in a very rigorous, a much more rigorous process in terms of how we begin to look at filling jobs and identifying ways to bring people into the organization. So it doesn't mean that we don't go forward. It does mean that we have a pretty high threshold in terms of making sure that succession planning, as well as the initiatives that we have put in place recently, work together and not work at the opposite of one another. And so this has been a lot of discussion that we've had internally, and we'll share that with you. Modified services on display. 2 of our modified construction delivery projects were officially completed last month. Modified delivery enables our clients to leverage DASNY's resources while still holding the contract and maintaining direct control of their projects. Renaissance Village, a nearly $52 million, 123-unit affordable and supportive housing development in Suffolk County, officially opened. Developed by Concern for Independent Living, Renaissance Village includes 50 units for homeless individuals with disabilities. DASNY provided oversight for this project from design through construction. Support services provided on site include medication management, training, symptom management, financial assistance, vocational training, and rehabilitative counseling. The new Buffalo Harbor State Park was also officially completed. DASNY provided construction oversight for the $15 million project. New features there include new recreational access with paved walking and bike paths, shaded seating areas with accent lighting and fishing platforms, redesigned parking and boating queue lines, fresh new lawn with beautiful vistas of Lake Erie and the harbor, open-air picnic pavilions, a nautically themed destination playground, and much more. So, Mr. Gardner, I hope you be the first to enjoy this based on
You
your
haven't been
location.
already, John?
Okay.
He's waiting for a snowstorm so we can go sledding, right?
You know, but great projects, and we're very proud of the work that our construction division has been doing to advance this. And we want to make sure that we feature these projects and how they impact people. Steve will now provide you with an update on the construction division's work.
Thank you. Behind tab 9 are the 3 construction division reports. I'll start with the construction projects report. On the cover is the SUNY Plattsburgh Wilson Hall renovation project. This is a project finished this past August. It was the gut renovation of a 9-story high-rise residence hall, including a basement, with new floor plans, new bathrooms, new windows, elevators, exterior panels, a new lobby, and an exterior courtyard. The project budget was $16 million. We started design in December of 2014 and finished design in January of 2016. JMZ Architects were the designer. Construction started in June of 16 and finished in August of 17 with Murnane Building Contractors as our general contractor. A couple of special features include a courtyard that was constructed outside of the building facing the Saranac River. Exterior entrance canopies were added and enhanced public spaces, including kitchens and completely rebuilt bathrooms throughout. A couple of the challenges on these types of projects are the very tight ceiling, floor-to-ceiling space. We have to work within those spaces, obviously. It made packing in the MEP work above ceiling quite difficult. And in addition, the campus lost their high-temp hot water line into Wilson Hall at the start of the heating season, late 2016. So we had to issue a change order to provide an alternate heat source throughout the winter, and then replace the existing high-temp hot water underground main in the spring with no impact to the project's completion date. Wilson Hall is the 6th gut renovation project in 6 years for the campus as part of their 10-year, $105 million program, which will conclude in 2021. On page 3, we have 6 new projects that were added that total over $50 million. 5 of the projects are CUNY renovation projects, and 1 additional project is a project in the Community Redevelopment Program. So we'll get started on those projects shortly. And on page 8, under construction expenditures, through September 2016, prior year, we were at $343 million. Our current year-to-date expenditures are $412 million, so the delta is a plus 69. And just to quickly give you some updates on projects and programs, I'll start with the Court Officers Training Academy. All trades continue working on contract and change order work, pushing to substantial completion. The site stormwater retention system is now complete, with follow-on site work ongoing. MEP and finished work continue in buildings 1 and 2. Con Ed was on site this past week and installed a second set of feeders, increasing our power to the project to 600 amps. We anticipate system startup and commissioning activities will follow. Most recently, we received a schedule update from our general contractor, pushing the completion date into December of this year. We're analyzing that schedule today. DASNY and Gilbane, who's our CM, continue with biweekly project status meetings and off-week biweekly scheduling meetings on site. The customer agency is fully aware of the project's status and delivery at this time. Second is Bernard Feinson, Buildings 7 and 8. I haven't updated the board on these projects in a while. The final inspection needed for the compliance certificate was conducted on November 2nd, related to the elevators, and the resulting report with conclusions is expected this week. The completion of the elevator scope will conclude this long-duration project for OPWDD, who plans to occupy both buildings shortly. SUNY Brockport, let's see, the project is progressing. The 4-story, 250-bed project is now fully framed. Roofing materials are being installed. Windows will be complete by the end of November, and the building will be enclosed by late November, early December, allowing for MEP and interior finish work to progress throughout the coming winter. We're still on track for our fall 2018 opening for that project. And SUNY Alfred's Mackenzie Hall, all trades are pushing the $17.5 million Phase 1 gut renovation project to a December 31 completion date. At this time, the project is about 2 weeks, maybe 4 at the most, behind schedule. I was out there on October 26th, walking with the construction manager. The project team continues to push the general contractor and ensure any owner-related matters are resolved so as to not impede construction progress. The project's phase one includes a new heating and cooling plant servicing Mackenzie Hall, tower room renovations, a new kitchen and dining area, a common core renovation with new suites, and exterior site work. All work must be completed prior to students' arrival for the spring semester by December 31st, 2017. South Beach Psych Center. DASNY conducted our monthly executive team meeting for the South Beach project earlier this week, including our CM, TDX, and OMH. The $265 million new inpatient building remains on track. Building packages 1, 2, and 3 are complete. Concrete slabs on metal deck construction is progressing, as is underground utilities, which will allow for the slab on grade construction to progress in early December. General contractor continues to progress building package 5 work in an orderly and efficient manner. And a couple of updates on Moynihan and Javits. Moynihan, demolition work continues on this massive DASNY permitted project with multiple shift work continuing. DASNY now has on-site presence at the project through our term consultant Tectonic. They're on site 2 to 3 days per week. That will increase to full-time in January 2018. Work is progressing on the train hall and the truss and skylight construction. If you go to that end of the building after the meeting and you look out the window, you'll see the project. It's open to the weather right now. There's no roof on the mid-block, but they're working on it. Javits Center expansion. The demolition work continues on the north end of the DASNY permitted project site, and activity on the transformer building is restarted. We are awaiting 30% design documents for review for the building expansion, with delivery date to DASNY expected in early December. I visited both Moynihan and Javits on November 2nd. Both projects are just massive in scope and are very high activity sites. The progress is rapid with multiple shift work ongoing. Our code compliance department is keeping pace with the expected activity, but continue to recruit to fill openings and gaps to support the projects. NYCHA, just some numbers. 31 security projects are complete, 14 are in construction. There's 14 electrical projects late in design with 5 soon to be in construction. On the appliance delivery program, 23 developments are completed at this time. And on the quality of life projects, 16 projects with stakeholder sign-off and 100% documents are moving into construction. Overall, the $100 million program continues to advance efficiently. Appliance delivery and installation should be complete by the end of this year. Security CCTV projects by the first quarter or early second quarter 2018. The lighting projects by the third quarter 2018. And the quality of life projects will spill into 2019. And lastly, on the GOZER front, DASNY continues to provide design and construction services for upstate and downstate projects related to the community redevelopment program. DASNY has provided GOZER with fee estimates for services, which will allow GOZER to proceed with budgetary decisions related to the use of DASNY for the construction phase of the projects. At this time, we believe approximately 30 projects will remain with DASNY through construction and closeout. All other projects will be transferred to the project's municipalities for the construction phase. DASNY continues to provide design review services for municipal managed projects. We've done design review on over 35 of those projects with 160 design reviews completed. That completes my report.
Questions for Steve?
Steve, the storm recovery projects, there's been some press stories recently about, oh, why is this taking so long? It's long ago since the storm. I assume we're not on the front line of that. I mean, we're not hearing directly from media about this.
Not from media, but certainly GOZER is pushing us and we're pushing the process. But the process is a process which I don't think everyone fully understood going into it. The fact of the matter is the projects were not well scoped, and before we can build something, we have to know what we're building. So, we did have to get some consultants out there. There were feasibility studies that had to be done rather than moving right to design. So it is a process. It takes time. I think that, we are beginning to hit our stride many years after the storm, but they will roll into construction, and the construction phase will take what it'll take. I mean, some of these are big dollar projects. So, yeah, we're not on the front lines, but we do know from the background noise what's going on.
I haven't seen DASNY's name connected at all, so.
And I don't think we have either. Yeah. And the community redevelopment is it's a small piece of the bigger funding that came as a result of the storms. So there's a whole lot more going on other than our 50 projects worth $150 million.
The funding process is difficult. There's audit after audit by FEMA, it's a difficult payment process.
And we have been audited.
We have been.
We have been audited. We've worked with Gozer to ensure that our house was in order, and we've come out of the audits in good shape. But it is there's a lot of eyes looking in on the dollars that are being spent, so we have to be careful along the way.
Steve, the total amount of money expected to be spent on the New York City Housing Authority projects is $100 million by the time you're done.
Yeah, the $100 million was in the budget a few years back. That's the start and end of what we have.
And what you say here is that there's 3 projects, 3 full service projects, but you've also said that you completed 31. So far, you've done 31. I don't understand the difference.
There's in approximate numbers, there's about $50 million in what we call security projects. Okay. Those projects are CCTV. They're layered access, entry into the buildings.
Got it.
Those projects, we've got 31 of those done. There's about 60 or 65 of those. Okay. 14 more are in construction, and another 14 are electrical projects, 5 of which are moving into construction. So that's kind of the portfolio under the security category. The second category was about $10 million in the appliance delivery and install.
Sure.
We're nearly done with that effort overall. We've got, 3 to 4 or 5 developments left to deliver appliances into. We've delivered into 23.
Was it necessary to displace residents to do that?
No. We had an orderly operation with our supplier and with the NYCHA local reps where we let them know when we were coming. And there was really no infrastructure work that had to be done to install the appliances. It was really a removal and a plug in and move out kind of deal. Yeah, it was interesting work.
Very well, so. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Please.
Sorry. With respect to deadlines, I know you guys, your team moves heaven and earth to hit the deadlines, but what are the implications of missing one, like the 12/31 deadline coming up where you're several weeks behind? What happens in that situation?
Well, unfortunately, that's a SUNY project, and if we don't finish, then those rooms that have been sold, we have to find other options for those kids. So it's not a good thing.
Right.
Some of the other projects, the implications aren't as, crazy, but on the SUNY projects, they're expecting those rooms. Those rooms are sold, and we really don't have any choice but to hit the deadline.
So even though at this point it's 2 to 4 weeks behind, I mean that we're only like 7 weeks. That amount of time can be caught up, and
we'll see. The good news is the kids don't show up on January 1st, so we do have a little bit of room to play, but we don't advertise that. So if we can erase that from the recording, I'd be happy.
All right, thank you.
There's a lot of overtime. There's shift work. There's trades that work at night, so they're out of the way of some of the trades that need the room during the day. There's a lot of strategies and planning that go into the last couple of months of these projects. But
I know the president mentioned, but Steve did a very nice job at the ENR to close that session out.
Thank you.
Very informative. And
it was. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Tomorrow we expect to close on an almost $300 million school district's revenue bond financing program to be funded. The bonds priced in October and collectively will save the 54 school districts across New York State who were pooled into refunding approximately $17 million. The program provides school districts with an efficient financing alternative. We are proud to support these school districts and deliver savings that can be reinvested in educating the next generation of New Yorkers. A series of regional press releases is planned to announce the closing. One other item that I will leave you with is right now in Washington, D.C., the House of Representatives is debating the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. House Bill H.R. 1, as it is known, would eliminate the ability of 501c3 organizations to issue tax-exempt bonds. These low-cost, tax-exempt private activity bonds are a critical source of infrastructure financing and support a wide range of construction projects that drive the economy of communities across New York, as well as across the country, including affordable housing, hospitals, and higher education. Furthermore, Bill H.R. 1 would prohibit advance refunding of tax-exempt bonds after the end of this calendar year, locking all bonds currently outstanding into their existing rates until they are callable. We are already working closely with private clients now in an effort to execute tax-exempt financing before the bill's potential December 31st, 2017 deadline. We have also reached out to the governor's office in New York and Washington and highlighted these efforts to them. They, in turn, are coordinating a broad strategy on how we are best able to stop this legislation and its impacts on states, municipalities, and middle-class families who are impacted, certainly in New York State and across the nation. We are also in communication with private clients across the state and have developed additional communications alerting staff internally, as well as our construction clients, so they are aware how the businesses would be impacted. We will continue to keep you updated as these events unfold.
Thank you, sir. Great question.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So the tax bill would not allow us, DASNY, to issue tax-exempt bonds on behalf of 501c3s either. Is that the?
That's correct.
So we're
after December 31st.
This tax bill could leave us with PIT and sales tax bonds only.
And school districts, city dorms, workers' comp, BOCES, certain of the libraries, but effectively, I understand your
Public
point.
entities.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. Huge. And a great segue to the next agenda item, the Office of Public Finance and Portfolio Monitoring. But before we do that, I'm going to ask for you to, for a motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of particular corporations and collective bargaining negotiations. Thank you very much, Senator. Darrell, thank you for the second. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. We're in executive session.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect that the members have just left an executive session during which no decisions were made other than to return to the public session. The next order of business is the financial report and a couple of attendant matters. Kim?
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of our financial report, as I've done the last couple of months, I just wanted to go through a couple of the highlights first. We are continuing to perform well against the budget that you had approved. There have been no additional financings that closed through September, so the number of deals and the revenues generated remain the same. We did close an additional deal during October. As a result of the fee increase that was implemented earlier in the year, however, we are consistent with our year-to-date revenues last year, and we are have done better in terms of our overall operations, just slightly. We also have continued to have a higher rate than budgeted of work that is being in support of our public clients. That continues to be at 93% relative to the 88% in our budget. Our operating expenditures continue to be about $400,000 above budget. That's about 1% of our operating budget. And that, again, is largely due to salaries, a combination of those contractually obligated with the unions, as well as the management confidential adjustments that were voted on earlier this year. We have savings in terms of the timing of legal services, utilities, and some other infrastructure items. Mr. Chair, as you had requested last month, we did add to the report some of the reserves, the status on those. So I'd just like to summarize where we are on those. We started in July of 2016 with the Healthcare Transformation Fund. That was at $5.5 million. We've spent approximately $300,000. We have no outstanding commitments, so the uncommitted balance is at $5.2 million. The Evolutionary Fund was established at $4 million. We've spent $1 million. We had no outstanding commitments at the end of September. There's been a small initial commitment since then, but we have just under $3 million uncommitted in that fund. And the 21st Century Technology Fund, we started at $3 million. We have spent approximately $100,000. We have $2.4 million in commitments, leaving $500,000 in uncommitted balances. Are there any questions on the financials? In terms of the two resolutions that are before the board today, those are really administrative to bring us in alignment with the organizations that support our investments, our purchases and sales of securities, as well as the group that does the financing support. So these go in line with our current organizational structure.
So is it necessary for us first to vote on the resolution if you're electing Ms. Tomlin before we vote on the resolution reaffirming the list? Is that the appropriate thing to do here?
The reaffirmation and adding Ms. Tomlin is all in one, but that should be first before the investment resolution.
Yes,
correct?
but the one that elects her, there's this one paragraph deal.
No, this was a replacement one.
I see. Okay, fine. There is a resolution that appears as a second page of tab number 7. It lists all of the officers that are being approved as assistant treasurers. It also lists the board secretary and the vice chair. Any questions about any of these? You will note that Stanley Reed's name was inadvertently left off of this list previously. He was on it before, he's on it now. Any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution? All right, John, thank you very much. Doug Gardner, John Johnson, thank you very much for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, the motion carries unanimously. And now there is I'm sorry, do you want to introduce it, Kim, or shall I just do it? This is the investment.
Yes, you can. You can. That was part of my original summary. Yes, thank you.
There is a second resolution authorizing the names of these employees to approve and execute investment transactions and then to execute, to execute investment transactions. It is there's a black line list which follows it, which is immediately after the resolution which we're looking at. We're going to vote on just to show you what the changes are. Very simple. Any questions? May I have a motion, please, to approve it? So moved. Sandra, thank you. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Paul. All in favor, please indicate with aye. 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 Motion passes unanimously. Kim, is there any other business from your group to come before the board?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one last possibility, and that's Mr. Cusack. Is there any?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One housekeeping matter, the memorandum in the board book details the circumstances surrounding our decision to administratively add Brian Cave LLP to the list of DASNY's pre-approved underwriters counsel. To review for the board, no action is required to be taken by the board because such counsel is not retained by DASNY. Only board approval is only required under Section 4.4 of the bylaws if DASNY is retaining counsel. Brian Cave will be working on one of the transactions that is coming forward in the next several weeks as underwriters counsel. And this approach, just for the record, is consistent with the original terms of the RFP as well as the board's September 7th, 2016 resolution establishing the panels, where we clearly indicated that this is the mechanic that was in place and how it would be used. And it is also the same procedure that we followed on February 8th of this year when the Public Finance Practice Group of Winston & Strawn migrated over to Catton Luchin Law Firm. And we did the disclosure, noted it in the minutes, and made sure that everyone was aware. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Questions for Mike? The members will note that there's also at the very end of the book, my book, please. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All right, I had a matter I thought I should address. I'm not going to address it. Is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn? Thank you, Senator. Gerard, thank you for the second. All in favor, please give an aye. Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you.